Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
It is my pleasure to welcome you to Temple Emeth and to our Shabbat Evening Service. I welcome you here to the Rabbi Louis J. Siegel Sanctuary in Teaneck, New Jersey. If you're joining us on live stream this evening, Shabbat Shalom to you. I'm so glad you could join us. The Siddur that we use on the Siddur that we use at our service, and I hope you have on live stream, is called Mishkan Tefillah. So if you have a copy of Mishkan Tefillah nearby, now is the time to find it, have it in hand, and be able to follow along for each and every one of our songs and prayers and every page number of our service this evening. Also, if you're watching on live stream, I hope you'll take a moment to post something in the chat or comment section of the live stream platform. It can be your name or your location, or it can simply be Shabbat Shalom, but by posting any of these things, then others will see that you are there, and this way we form bonds of virtual community together. Shabbat Shalom to everyone here in the sanctuary. It's nice to see you here in person. And you too should have access to a copy of Mishkan Tefillah. So please take a moment right now to find a copy and make sure that you're ready for our service this evening. This evening, Temple Emeth is proud to partner with the National Council of Jewish Women on Reproductive Rights Shabbat, also known as Repro Shabbat. Our celebration will include special prayers and readings which highlight the Jewish people's commitment to reproductive rights and bodily autonomy. We will also hear from Professor Michal Rauscher of Rutgers University, who will offer a talk later this evening entitled Our Choices, Our Stories, American Jews and Abortions. It is my pleasure to welcome members of NCJW Bergen County Section into the sanctuary this evening, along with everyone else who has gathered here. As we prepare to engage with the songs of our tradition, it is my pleasure to welcome back to the Bima Rabbi Rebecca Einstein-Shore, who will serve as our cantorial soloist this evening, accompanied by Tom Mustachio. And now I invite you to open your copy of Mishkan Tefillah as we begin our service with the lighting of our Shabbat candles, found on page 120 and preceded by an opening reading. For the honor of lighting our Shabbat candles, we call upon Temple member Gail Goldberg.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we, in our own day, be among those who kindle light. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, ahad l'kner shel Shabbat.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, lehad likner shel Shabbat.
Our service continues at this time with the Shabbat Evening Kiddush, which is found in the Siddur on page 123. It is also preceded by an English reading. For the honor of leading us in Kiddush, we call upon Temple member Nancy Scher. Please rise if you are able for the Kiddush. Okay, so you're right there.
As evening falls, we give thanks for the blessings of the past week, for life and strength, for work and rest, for home, love, and community. As we enjoy this bounty, may we be inspired to bring goodness into the lives of others. We raise a cup of wine in gratitude for the miracle of creation and for the gift of this day of rest. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri
Please be seated. We turn to page 128 at this time, where we find our opening song for the service. Right in the middle of the page, we join together in singing Yedid Nefesh.
Yedid nefesh of harachaman, Yedid nefesh of harachaman, meshokav decha el ritzoncha, meshokav decha Yalalai lai lai el ritzoncha. Yarutz avdecha kemayal, yishtachav elai lalai lalai lai lai el muhadarecha. Yarutz avdecha kemayal, yishtachav elai lalai lalai lai el muhadarecha.
As we prepare for the main part of our service on this Repro Shabbat, I would like to set the tone by offering a prayer furnished by the National Council of Jewish Women entitled A Prayer for Repro Shabbat. God of our ancestors, Elohei Imotenu Vavotenu, we affirm that you have created each of us in your sacred image, endowed with the inherent right to dignity and autonomy. We ask that you guide us towards a caring and loving community and nation that reveres this dignity in each of us. We affirm that reproductive freedom, the sacred right to own the personhood of one's own body, is a fundamental part of the just society for which we strive in your name. We ask that you endow us with the strength and resolve we need, because the path that lies ahead is challenging, and we all need resilience, strength, and courage. We ask that you protect the most impacted and marginalized among us, because it is they who are most at risk. We do this work in your name, O God, because we are the compassionate, loving creations of a compassionate, loving, and just God. It is holy, sacred work. May our country become a place of liberty and justice for all, and may our care for one another include care and respect for each other's right to good and affordable health care, including abortion care, and the right to live safely and securely as we each follow our path of conscience and the God we each do or do not believe in. Amen. We turn at this time in Mishkan Tefillah to page 144. On page 144, we join in the Chatzi Kaddish.
Yid kadal v'yid kadash shemei rabah, ve'amad yivrach yirutei, ve'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uvyom echon, uv'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala, uvizman kariv, v'meru amen.
rise if you are able for the Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu is found on page 146.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech ha'olam, asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim, b'chokhmah potech sha'arim, ובתבונה משנה עתים, ומחליף את הזמנים, ומסדר את הכוכבים במשמרותיהם ברקיע כרצונו. בורא יום ולילה, גולל אור מפני חושך, וחושך מפני אור, ומעביר יום ומביא לילה, ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה, אדוני צבאות שמו. אל חי וקיים, תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, Ha'ma'ariv aravim. As you taught Torah to those whose names I bear, teach me Torah too. Its mystery beckons, yet I struggle with its truth. You meant Torah for me, did you mean the struggle for me too? Don't let me struggle alone. Help me to understand, to be wise, to listen, to know. Lead me into the mystery. Baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Please be seated.
Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha b'veitecha uv'lektecha v'derech uv'shokbecha uv'kumecha ukshartam le'ot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot bein einecha uchtavtam al mezozot beitecha uv'isharecha למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. Emeth.
We turn at this time to page 157. We look to the middle of the page as we read responsively in English. In a world torn by violence and pain, a world far from wholeness and peace, give us the courage to say, Adonai, there is one God in heaven and earth. The high heavens declare your glory. May earth reveal your justice and love. From bondage in Egypt we were delivered. At Sinai we bound ourselves to your way. Inspired by prophets and instructed by sages, time and again we overcame oppressive forces. Though our failings are many and our faults are great, it has been our glory to bear witness to our God, keeping alive in dark ages your vision of a world redeemed. Let us continue to work for the day when the nations will be one and at peace. Then shall we rejoice as Israel did, singing on the shores of the sea.
Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nehedar b'kodesh nora tehilot, o seifele nora tehilot, o seifele malchuteh Ata Adonai Gal Yisrael.
We turn now to page 161, and we read together at the top of the page. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up waiting to do your will. Baruch atah Adonai, haporeis sukat shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim.
Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat lidorotam b'rit olam beini uvein v'nei Yisrael oti le'olam beini uvein v'nei Yisrael oti le'olam ki sheishet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim ve'et haaretz uvayom hashvi'i shavat vayinafash uvayom hashvi'i shavat vayinafash.
We turn at this time to page 164 in the Siddur, where we find a section of prayers known collectively as the Tefillah. Please rise if you are able for the Tefillah.
Adonai sifatai tiftachu fi yagi tehilatecha. Adonai, open my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei Hakol, V'Zocher Chasdei Avot V'Imachot, Umevi Gehula Livnei V'neihem, Lima'an Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshiach U'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Ve'ezrat Sarah, Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechayei HaKol Atah Rav Lehoshia, Mashiv HaRuach U'Morid HaGashem, Mechachel Chayim B'Chesed, Mechayei HaKol B'Rachamim Rabim, Somech Novlim V'Rofei Cholim, Umatir Asurim, Umekayim Emunato, Lishenei Afar, Mi Chamocha Ba'al Gevurot, Umido Melach, Melech Memit Umechayim. Yeshua. V'ne'eman atah lehachayot hakol. Baruch atah Adonai michayei hakol. Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh. Ukdoshim b'chol yom yahalelucha selah. Baruch atah Adonai ha'el hakadosh.
Please be seated. We turn at this time to page 177 in the Siddur for a section of the tefillah that we call Hoda'ah, which means gratitude or thanksgiving. We read at the top of the page, God of goodness, we give thanks for the gift of life, wonder beyond words, for the awareness of soul, our light within, for the world around us so filled with beauty, for the richness of the earth which day by day sustains us. For all these and more we offer thanks. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha, ulecha na'eh lehodot. And as we turn the page, we join together in Hebrew offering a prayer for peace. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim le'olam, ki atah hu melech adon lechol hashalom, v'tov be'enecha levarech et amcha Yisrael, b'chol eit uv'chol sha'ah b'shlomecha. Baruch atah Adonai, hamvarech et amo Yisrael ba'shalom. We take a moment now for Tefillat Halev, a moment to offer to God the prayer of our hearts. Inspirational readings for this time of silence may be found in your Siddur on pages 180 and 181.
Oh, have
Our service continues now on page 363 of the Siddur, which is where we find the beginning of our Torah service, Seder Kriyat Torah. Assemble the people, men, women, and children, and the strangers in your cities to hear, to learn, to revere Adonai your God, to observe faithfully the words of this Torah, and let their children who do not yet know it hear, that they too may learn to revere Adonai your God. We continue in the middle of the next page. Please rise if you are able for the Torah service. Scroll is the secret of our people's life from Sinai until now. Its teaching is love and justice, goodness and hope. Freedom is its gift to all who treasure it.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo, Gadlul Adonai Iti, Unerom Mema Shemo Yachdav, Lecha Adonai HaGedula, VeHaGevura, VeHaTiferet, VeHaNetzach, VeHaHod, Ki Chol Bashamayim Uvaretz, Ki Chol Bashamayim Uvaretz, Lecha Adonai HaMamlacha, V'Nignaseh L'Chol Erosh.
Please be seated. This week's Torah portion is Parshat Bo. And before I say anything about this week's Torah portion, I suppose I should say that if you look on the national website of the National Council of Jewish Women, it says that Repro Shabbat is in 3 weeks on February 21st and 22nd. And it didn't work out that way on the Temple Emeth calendar, but obviously that's why we're here now. But the reason that it's then is that's Parshat Mishpatim, and Parshat Mishpatim is all about the laws that make for an orderly society, that guide our relationships with one another, and very importantly in Parshat Mishpatim is a law that indicates very clearly that a fetus is not a living being, and we can get into that more when we actually get to Parshat Mishpatim. So, that having been said, it is Repro Shabbat here at Temple Emeth. It is not Parshat Mishpatim anywhere in the world. It is Parshat Bo. And so the section of Parshat Bo, it comes a little bit earlier in the Torah, needless to say, and Parshat Bo is right in the middle of the Exodus story. And in fact, it is the part of the Exodus story where we are first given the details about the Passover ritual. They wouldn't have called it a Seder in the days of the Torah, but it was certainly a ritual by which they marked God's heroism and strength and redemptive power in the Exodus, and they made a commitment to pass on that knowledge to the next generation. And so that is the core of the Passover Seder, even though the details have certainly evolved over the centuries and the millennia. And so I think that this relates to our theme of reproductive rights, certainly not directly, but it relates indirectly in the sense that as early as the Exodus story, we understand the power of standing together as a community. We understand the idea that God acts in history, and God acts on behalf of justice. And we understand the idea that for these values to endure, they must be taught from generation to generation. So take that as sort of an overview of how Parashat Bo can relate to the themes of Repro Shabbat. And, maybe find another synagogue in 3 weeks and go again somewhere else that's observing it on Parashat Mishpatim. But in the meantime, we are here at Parashat Bo, and Rabbi Shore is going to be chanting the Torah beginning at Exodus chapter 12, verse 21, which you can find here in the sanctuary in the large blue Torah commentary books on page 460. And if you're watching on live stream and you have wisely borrowed a copy of the revised Torah commentary from the temple for just such this moment, you can find the same section, Exodus chapter 12, verse 21, in the revised Torah commentary on page 412. Again, that's page 412. For the honor of the Aliyah, we call upon Nancy Walensky and Marcia Sobel. Baruch Adonai Hambarach Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hambarach Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam, Asher Baruch Banu Mikol Hamim, V'notan Lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayikra Moshe lechol ziknei Yisrael vayomer alehem mishko v'yakchu lachem tzon lemishpechotechem v'shachtu hapasach v'ukachtem agadat azov v'tabaltem badam asher basaf v'gatem el ha-mashkov vel shetei ha-mezuzot min hadam asher basaf v'atem lo tatzu ish mi petach beito ad boker v'avar Adonai lingof et mitzrayim v'ra'a et hadam al ha-mashkov v'al shetei ha-mezuzot ufasach Adonai al ha-petach v'lo yitain ha-mashchit lavo el b'techem lingof ushmartem et hadavar hazeh lichok lecha ulevanecha ad olam v'haya ki tavahu el haaretz asher yitain Adonai lachem kasher diber ushmartem et havodah hazot v'haya ki yomru alechem b'nechem ma havodah hazot lachem v'amartem zevach pesach hu l'Adonai asher pasach al b'tei b'nei Yisrael b'mitzrayim b'nokfu et mitzrayim v'eit batenu hatzil v'yikod ha'am v'yishachavu v'yelchu v'yasu b'nei Yisrael kasher tziva Adonai et Moshe v'Aaron kein asu Vayihi b'chatzi halayla v'Adonai haka kol b'chor ba'eretz Mitzrayim mipkor Pharaoh hayoshev al kiso ad bakor hashavi asher בבית הבחור וכל בכור בהמה.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam nata botechenu. Baruch atah Adonai, noten ha-Torah.
Amen.
This is different from not like that.
At this time, our thoughts turn to those in need of healing as we prepare to offer a mishaberach for healing found in the Siddur on page 371. If you are thinking of someone in need of healing and you're watching on live stream, I invite you to share the name of your loved one in the chat or comment section of the live stream platform. And here in the sanctuary, if you're thinking of someone in need of healing, I invite you to share the name of your loved one out loud or in your heart at this time. As we offer our prayer for healing, we think of those who are affected by the violence in the Middle East. At this time, I would like to acknowledge the outstanding work that NCJW has done advocating for the women who suffered rape and other forms of sexual violence at the hands of Hamas on October 7th. Over the course of the current ceasefire, the majority of hostages to be released are women. We pray for their healing, understanding that it is a long journey ahead. Apropos of this evening's service, we dedicate our mishaberach prayer to the many Americans who are now denied reproductive health care in their local communities. To receive care, some of it life-saving care, some must travel across state lines. Others are forced to endure poor health care outcomes because of unreasonable restrictions on their autonomy. We pray for healing for them all, understanding that healing is often a measure of access to appropriate health care, and health care is a Jewish value and a human right. We think as well of our temple members and their loved ones in need of healing. Their names will appear on your screen, either on live stream or in the corner of the sanctuary, as we turn to page 371 and we join together in the mishaberach.
May
continue at this time with the lifting and dressing of the Torah, which is found at the bottom of page 370. Please rise if you are able for Hagba and Galila.
Vizot HaTorah Asher Sam Moshe Livnei Bnei Yisrael Al Pi Adonai B'yad Moshe Yalla lai 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 Yalla lai 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 Yalla lai 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 lai
We remain standing as we turn to page 374 in the Siddur. Yahalalu et Shem Adonai Kiniskav Shemo Levado.
Odo haleretz v'shamayim vayarem keren le'amo tehila lechol
Take a step.
Chasitav livnei Yisrael am kiruvo. Hallelujah, hallelujah.
Ki lekachto natati lachem torati al ta'azovu.
Eitz Chaim hi lamachazikim ba v'tomcheha me'ushar deracheha darchei Noam v'chol netivoteha shalom hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva kadesh Yameinu kekedem.
Please be seated. In just a moment, we will offer the prayer for the state of Israel found in the Siddur on page 552. As we prepare to offer the words of the prayer together, behind me is a poster with photographs of the more than 250 hostages who were taken on October 7th, 2023. Some have been released in the current ceasefire, and a few more are scheduled to be released this week. We are grateful for their release, and we look forward to the time that each and every one of the hostages can be reunited with their family. We pray that God will bring each of them from darkness to light. We turn now to page 552 as our service continues with the prayer for the state of Israel. Please rise. Avinu Shabashamayim, Sur Yisrael v'Goalo, Barech et Medinat Yisrael Reishit Smichat Geulatenu, Hagen Aleha Be'evrat Chastecha, Ufros Aleha Sukat Shlomecha, Ushlach orcha b'mincha l'rasheha sareha v'yoetzeha. V'takneim be'etzah tova milfanecha. V'natata shalom ba'aretz. V'simchat olam liyoshveha. V'nomar. Amen. O Heavenly One, Protector and Redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel, which marks the dawning of hope for all who seek peace. Shield it beneath the wings of your love. Spread over it the canopy of your peace. Send your light and truth to all who lead and advise, guiding them with your good counsel. Establish peace in the land and fullness of joy for all who dwell there. Amen. We remain standing at this time as we turn to page 586. We look to the bottom of the page as our service continues with the Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, latit gedula liyotzeh breshit, shelo asanu kigoye haratzot, v'lo samanu kimishbechot ha'adama, shelo sam chalkenu kahem, v'goram leinu kechol hamonam, va'anachnu korim, umishtachavim umodim, livnei melech, malchei hamlachim, hakadosh baruch hu. V'nemar v'haya Adonai limelech al kol haaretz bayom hahu yihya Adonai echad u'shemo echad.
Please be seated. Until the landmark ruling of Roe versus Wade in 1973, having an unplanned or high-risk pregnancy was a matter of life and death. In too many cases, desperate women opted to have abortions from unqualified providers or in unsterile conditions. These were called back alley abortions, and the nickname conveyed not only the sense of risk, but also the abandonment and shame that went with accessing treatment in this way. And some who had back alley abortions paid with their lives. For 50 years, these risks were mitigated when the right to an abortion was affirmed by the Supreme Court and enshrined into law. Even during this time, restrictions on funding and state regulations intended to place obstacles in the way of abortion access no doubt cost more women their lives. And now that Roe has been overturned, the risk has increased dramatically. It is likely that this decision has cost more lives that we mourn at this time. The Mourner's Kaddish affirms God's presence in our world even as we grapple with the loss of someone precious in our lives. The loss is even more difficult when it seems preventable. And so as we affirm a better future for reproductive health care, we remember a past and even a present when it did not exist. We mourn, and in mourning we hope, and in hoping we take action. This Shabbat, we remember one for whom we are in the Shloshim 30-day period of mourning, Carl Nam, a member of Temple Emeth and husband of Adrian Nam. We remember as well those whose yahrzeits occurred this week. Edith Arams, Lillian Bayer, Herbert Besson, Evelyn Blattman, Shirley Bloom, Barry Bloomfield, Nancy Boonen, Enid Broder, Albert Brownstein, Francis Burroughs, Leo Burroughs, Dorothy Carbon, Alan Ross Dillon, Elise Beth Dubno, Solomon Z. Furziger, Lillian Freed, Elsie Gerber, Anna Gordon, Herman Hahn, Alan Hecht, Max Heischober, Marvin Hopman, Max Ignal, Vera Kosakoff, Erwin Kramer, Michael Kramer, Edith Lee, Louis Lenny, Albert Levine, Emma Levy, Ida Levy, Sylvia Sue Liberman, Charles Richard Mayer, Gussie Mandelkern, Edith May, Sherwood Bradford Menkes, Meyer Millman, Jim Nagin, Masao Nia, Roberto Pires, Suzanne Purcell, Bernice B. Robinson, Sally Rosenberg, Zalman Schatzberg, Elaine Siebert, Celia Siegel, Blanche Smolin, Anna Solomon, Molly Tanner, Ruben Wasserman, and Elizabeth Watson. We remember the names of 6 of the 6 million who perished in the Holocaust. Chaim Volkun of Poland, age 13, Yentl Volkun of Poland, age 11, Hersel Volkun of Poland, age 13, Sara Volkun of Poland, age 15, Moshe Volman of the Soviet Union, age 17, and Boris Wolfovich of the Soviet Union, age 12. And we remember those who lost their lives in the plane and helicopter crash in Washington, D.C. this week. May their memories be for a blessing. We turn at this time to page 598. Please rise if you are able for the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabba, be'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon, v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'yizman karib v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mivorach le'olam olamei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemeid kudsha b'rechu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama Rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved, and let us say, amen. Please be seated. It is my pleasure at this time to call upon Marcia Sobel, a member of our Board of Trustees, to offer Shabbat greetings and announcements.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, it's my pleasure to welcome you to our Shabbat evening service. This evening's Oneg Shabbat is sponsored by our Social Action Committee and NCJW Bergen County Section in honor of Ripro Shabbat. I want to thank, before she even speaks, Professor Michal Rosher of Rutgers University for joining us tonight. Tomorrow morning at 10:30, Temple member Florette Koffler will speak on longing for Sepharad, why the Jews of Spain matter. Next weekend is a big weekend here, so pay attention. First, next Friday night, September 7th at 8 o'clock, the Viewpoints. What did I say? Oh, see, I'm glad you're paying attention. Okay, so let's do that again. Next weekend, join us next Friday, February 7th at 8 o'clock as the Viewpoints Committee sponsors a Shabbat service in honor of Jewish Disabilities Awareness, Acceptance, and Inclusion Month. Guest speaker Rabbi Rebecca Einstein-Shore will share her personal experiences and heartfelt reflections about life with her son, offering a unique perspective on love, resilience, and understanding. Also that weekend, Temple Emeth is pleased to host our annual One Book, One Synagogue Shabbaton on Saturday, February 8th, not September. This day of study, prayer, and food will focus on the themes of Cantica by Elizabeth Graver. Rabbi Serbiu will lead a text study starting at 9 a.m., followed by Shabbat services at 10:30. A festive and free lunch follows at noon, and at 12:45 p.m. we'll watch a documentary film about Turkish Sephardic family. Please register for this by Tuesday, February 4th. Also, Temple Emeth is pleased to welcome the author, Elizabeth Graver, for a special Zoom-only presentation with a question and answer time on Tuesday, February 25th at 7:45. So watch for Zoom link in your weekly email. On Saturday, February 15th at 10:30, Cantor Tillam will lead a Shabbat morning healing service. This service features special readings and music to help guide us through life's challenges. On February 21st at 8 o'clock, the Social Action Committee will again sponsor a Highest Refugee Shabbat. Our speaker will be Merrill Zack, the Chief Global Community Engagement Officer of Highest and Executive Director of Highest New York. Temple Emeth will sing at the service, and Carol Shansky will share her talent on the flute, recognizing contributions of refugee composers. Coming up, a few more things. This year's Gilda and Robert Boyd Glazer concert will take place on Sunday, March 2nd at 2 o'clock. The concert, titled Jewish Legacy, features classical saxophonist Paul Cohn. For more information, you can see flyers in the lobby or contact Carol Shansky, but there'll be a lot more publicity about that coming up. Once again, Temple Emeth is collecting clothing and other items for Midnight Run. For a full list of items, please check the weekly email, or you can see the flyers in the lobby for that as well. Finally, this year's Shalach Manot campaign is underway. Information on how to place your order is in your weekly email and on the Temple Emeth website. Order forms are also in the lobby. Please reach out to Shel Grossman with any questions, and if you'd like to help, volunteer. Thank you to this evening's volunteers in the live stream control room. Pauline Hecht and Rachel Eastman are at the controls this evening. Shabbat Shalom and Shavua Tov.
We'll be concluding the formal part of our service in just a moment with our closing song, and then it will be my honor to introduce our guest speaker. So she'll speak, and then we'll be able to go to the Oneg Shabbat and enjoy one another's company over a cookie and coffee, and be able to ask her any questions that we have following her speech. But first, we're going to go to our closing song, which is found on page 652 in Mishkan Tefillah. The song is Aniva Atah. It is a folk favorite in Israel, and we sang it actually, coincidentally, we sang it a few weeks ago when our guest speaker was Rabbi Menachem Creditor. His topic was solidarity with Israel, and Aniva Atah means you and I will change the world. And now, as we examine the themes of NCJW Reproductive Rights Shabbat, again, we are reminded, Aniva Atah, you and I can change the world. We join together on page 652.
Ani ve'ata nishane et ha'olam. Ani ve'ata az yavou kfar kulam. Amru et zeh kodem lefanai, ze lo mishaneh. Ani ve'ata nishane et ha'olam. Ani ve'ata ninaseh mehatchala. Yihye lanu ra, ein davar ze lo nora. Amru et zeh kodem lefanai, ze lo mishaneh. Ani ve'ata nishane et ha'olam.
Thank you to Rabbi Rebecca Einstein-Shore for serving as our cantorial soloist this evening, and to Thomas Dascio for his accompaniment. Yasher koach to both of you. As we prepare to hear our guest speaker on Reproductive Rights Shabbat, I'd like to call on Rabbi Rebecca Einstein-Shore, who was our guest speaker last year at this time, to offer a short reading provided by NCJW, a short reading about Repro Shabbat.
This weekend, we celebrate Repro Shabbat, in which we are partnering with the National Council of Jewish Women, of which I am a life member, as a way of bringing the whole Jewish community together to talk about what our tradition teaches about reproductive health, rights, and justice. And when we study, we know reproductive freedom is a Jewish value. 1 in 4 people who can get pregnant will terminate a pregnancy by the age of 45. That includes members of our own community, for their own deeply personal reasons. So many important stories in our community go untold. Our tradition not only permits the termination of pregnancy, but even requires it when the life of the pregnant person is at stake. And of course, kavod habriot, human dignity, and more broadly, building a just society are ultimate Jewish concerns. Our community, our wider Jewish community, not only permits the termination of pregnancy, our communities should be places where anyone who is terminated or may ever need to terminate a pregnancy feels loved, supported, and welcomed. And our communities should be places where everyone can feel welcome to share their reproductive health stories without fear of shame or stigma. Let us be a community that welcomes the sharing of personal journeys, whether that involves termination, fertility challenges, pregnancy loss, or any other experience. With the fall of Roe v. Wade, 40 million people of reproductive age are now trapped in states hostile to abortion access. Those harmed most by abortion bans are communities of Black, Indigenous, and other peoples of color, people struggling to make ends meet, people living in rural areas, immigrants, disabled people, youth, and trans and non-binary people. During a time when abortion access matters more than it ever has in memory in our lifetimes, we here at Temple Emeth are committed to this work, and we'll be sharing with you ways that we can all be part of advocating for reproductive health access, rights, and justice in the weeks and months to come.
Michal Rauscher is an associate professor at Rutgers University in the Department of Jewish Studies since the fall of 2018. Her research lies at the intersection of Israel studies, Jewish ethics, and the anthropology of women in Judaism. As a Fulbright Fellow, Dr. Rauscher conducted ethnographic research on reproductive ethics of Haredi ultra-Orthodox Jewish women in Israel. Her book, Conceiving Agency, Reproductive Authority Among Haredi Women, was published in 2020. She has also published on sexuality and gender in Judaism, religion and bioethics, and abortion legislation in Israel. Dr. Rauscher earned her PhD in religious studies with a concentration in religious ethics and anthropology from Northwestern University. She has an MA from the University of Pennsylvania in bioethics and graduated from the joint program with the Jewish Theological Seminary and Columbia University, earning a BA in Hebrew Bible and a BA in religion. Before joining the faculty at Rutgers, Michal was an assistant professor of Israel and modern Jewish thought in the Department of Judaic Studies at the University of Cincinnati. To speak this evening on Our Choices, Our Stories, American Jews and Abortions, it is my pleasure to call upon Dr. Michal Rauscher.
Thank you, Rabbi Sirbu. It's wonderful to be here with all of you. Can everybody hear me? Great. It's great to be here. I am a neighbor and a friend to so many of you, and it's really wonderful. I want to thank, in particular, Lynn Chaikin and Hildy, thank you, and the rest of the Social Action Committee for inviting me for Repro Shabbat. Even though it is not officially Repro Shabbat, according to NCJW, I think it is actually really important to remember the fact that the book of Exodus, which we are in, has a lot of reproductive stories in it. So Parshat Mishpatim, which NCJW has determined to be the official Repro Shabbat, does not need to be the only Repro Shabbat. We can talk about reproduction all the time, really, while we're reading the book of Exodus and the book of Genesis. Just in the book of Exodus, remember it starts with a lineage, and then it goes to reproductive catastrophe with the Pharaoh's decree against all the Jewish Hebrew baby boys, and the midwives are reproductive heroes. So, and this parsha has another reproductive catastrophe with the death of the firstborn of all of the Egyptians. So there is a lot of reproduction to talk about in Exodus. But needless to say, that is actually not my topic tonight. Instead, I want to bring us really much more into the modern period. Because what I want to emphasize tonight is three things. One, Jews in America have been active in reproductive health and rights for over a century. This is in our blood as American Jews. So that's number one. Number two is Jews have abortions, as Rabbi Shor just shared with us, right? Jews have abortions. We don't talk about it very often, but we do, and I'm going to share some of those stories with you tonight. And the third is that when Jews have abortions, they see those abortions as consistent with their Jewish identities, whether religious or cultural or historical identities. And we're going to talk about all of that tonight. So even though there is a wealth of textual sources, there is also a wealth of history and cultural and identity affiliation with reproductive health and rights in the Jewish community. In the wake of the 2022 Supreme Court decision, Dobbs v. Jackson, Women's Health, and the abortion bans that subsequently went into effect in over 20 states, individual Jews, rabbis, and Jewish advocacy groups filed lawsuits in Indiana, Florida, Mississippi, and Kentucky, objecting to the abortion restrictions. Did anybody hear about these lawsuits? Yes? Great. In these lawsuits, the plaintiffs claimed that the state's abortion bans violated the religious freedom of Jews and others. To give just one example, the affidavit filed in Florida by Rabbi Barry Silver, who's unfortunately passed away since then, cites numerous biblical sources as well as Maimonides, who held that a woman had a, quote, religious duty to abort her fetus up until the time of birth if the fetus threatens her physical or emotional health or well-being. Silver claimed that this is an established precept of traditional Jewish law and has become part of the shared cultural, ethical fabric of the Jewish community and all branches of Judaism today. Today, religion and abortion are nearly inseparable in our national discourse. But religion has not always been part of the way we talk about or think about abortion in the United States. It surprises many people to learn that the fight to legalize abortion in the 1960s did not face significant opposition from religious groups. Although some Jewish, Catholic, and Protestant leaders might have been privately opposed to abortion, they were not eager to make their opinions public or to wade in the political discourse. When they did enter the political discussion by the end of the 1960s, many religious leaders actually advocated for more access to abortion. A decade later, though, in the story that we all know, Catholics, evangelicals, and Mormons had formed what they called the religious right, and they set opposition to abortion as one of their shared values. Since then, the narrative has largely been that religion opposes abortion, even though many people of faith do not oppose abortion. In fact, most people of faith support legal access to abortion. In the most recent survey from the Public Religion Research Institute in 2023, majorities across most religious traditions say that abortion should be legal in all or most cases. I'm including here Unitarian Universalists, Buddhists, Catholics of color, Black Protestants, white mainline and non-evangelical Protestants, even a majority of white Catholics, Muslims, Hispanic Catholics, and other Protestants of color. 81% of Jewish Americans express support for abortion in all or most cases. And this belief is distributed across age groups and evenly distributed among Jewish men and women. This support for abortion among Jews is not new. Jews have a rich history of supporting reproductive health, rights, and justice in America. In the early 20th century, Emma Goldman and other Jews were among the first activists to advocate for sexual and reproductive freedom. They were attuned to the concerns of immigrant women who knew that having fewer children would allow them to go to school and have careers, bring their families out of poverty, and build an American life. In 1948, Lena Levine, a Jewish obstetrician and gynecologist, founded the International Planned Parenthood Federation. In the 1960s, Heather Booth, a student at the University of Chicago, started the abortion counseling service of Women's Liberation. Anybody know what that was called? The Janes. An underground abortion service that assisted more than 11,000 women in ending their pregnancies prior to Roe v. Wade. More Jewish women, in addition to Heather Booth, were part of the Jane Collective during the 1960s and the 1970s. Several rabbis were part of the Clergy Consultation Service, a group of over 1,000 clergy across the United States who helped women get abortions before Roe. This wasn't secret either. They took out an ad on the front page of the New York Times to tell everybody what they were doing and that these were clergy available to help women get abortions. In the 1970s, Jewish lawyers like Harriet Pilpel and Ruth Bader Ginsburg helped craft legal arguments for reproductive rights. During this period, Jewish feminists like Gloria Steinem and Joyce Antler were also active in the abortion rights movement, and Jewish women were involved in the women's health movement, founding the Boston Women's Health Collective that wrote Our Bodies Ourselves, the book that was on my shelf when I was growing up. The National Council of Jewish Women, the organizers of Repro Shabbat, have also been part of reproductive health, rights, and justice for over a century. More recently, they've been lobbying Congress, helping organize lawsuits in the wake of Dobbs, and organizing rabbis, cantors, and Jewish educators to advocate for reproductive justice. They have achieved an amazing accomplishment. Over 1,500 rabbis for repro, as they're called, have signed a pledge stating their commitment to reproductive justice. Rabbis for Repro is a remarkable expression of Jewish religious support for abortion and reproductive justice. Jews have also updated rituals and adapted liturgy to mark their pregnancy terminations. Mayim Chaim, which is a mikvah, a ritual bath that serves Jews from a variety of backgrounds and affiliations, offers immersion ceremonies in the Boston area that mark life transitions. 2 of these ceremonies are for people who've had an abortion. Ritual Well, an online database of new Jewish ceremonies and liturgy, contains several more rituals, prayers, and poems about abortion. If you're curious, you can find all of these online. I want to tell you about one such ritual created by Deborah Eisenbach-Budner, a Jewish educator and mother of 3 children who had an abortion at the age of 40. She says this blessing came to her. Bless you, Rachamema, compassionate nurturer of life, who helps us choose life, by which she means her own life. Like other rituals surrounding abortion, Eisenbach-Budner's prayer is a contemporary adaptation of ancient sources. She refers to God with the word Rachamema. This name combines the Hebrew word for womb, rechem, the word for compassion, rachamim, and the word for mother, ima. The words at the end of the prayer come from a passage in Deuteronomy. I have put before you today blessing and curse, life and death. Choose life. Although choose life has been co-opted by the anti-abortion movement to refer to fetal life, Eisenbach-Budner and other Jewish women who've had abortions interpret this line to mean that women can choose their own lives. These Jewish groups and individuals have created a wealth of textual interpretations and liturgical sources that reflect liberal Jewish support for abortion. Jewish support for abortion can also be seen in the stories shared by Jews who have had abortions. Jews who share their abortion experiences are part of a growing movement that encourages people to talk about their abortions. Since the early 2000s, Jews have published their abortion stories in the Jewish press. In these narratives, from those who are unaffiliated, secular, to those who are ultra-Orthodox, People revealed that they made the decision to terminate under all sorts of circumstances. Some were in college and didn't want to have a baby yet. Others knew they never wanted children. Some terminated because of an abusive relationship or to take care of the children they already have. Others terminated after a fetal diagnosis. Some discussed it with their rabbis and others didn't. Some are rabbis and constructed rituals and ceremonies for themselves and others to mark the Jewishness of their abortion. In these narratives, we see that Jews see abortions as part of their life story and a morally right decision that they made based on their own priorities and abilities. In August of 2023, I began a new research project collecting abortion stories from Jews in the United States. The response to our call for participants was phenomenal and frankly overwhelming. Within the first 3 months of the study, we received 150 survey responses and conducted 75 interviews. In total, since then, we've interviewed over 100 Jews who've had abortions in the United States. The majority of our participants had an abortion because it wasn't the right time for a child. This is consistent with the national research on why U.S. women have abortions. Many of the women in our study were using contraception when they conceived and were grateful for the opportunity to terminate because it meant that they could continue on the trajectory they set for themselves. Women have shared that their families and their communities expected them to finish school, get a job, get married, and when ready, have children. Our participants thought about their abortions within a Jewish framework, but this meant different things for different people. More than 65% of our survey respondents considered Jewish law and Jewish values in their abortion decisions. So here are some examples. An Orthodox Jewish woman whose fetus had a terminal condition consulted her rabbi, who, quote, absolutely and unequivocally recommended an abortion. He didn't say you could, he said you should. Another woman said she felt like she couldn't get God's approval, but getting a rabbi's approval was as close as she was going to get. Even though she and her husband do not usually ask a rabbi for questions, she felt this was one time she needed to hear from her rabbi. A secular woman had an abortion after receiving a cancer diagnosis, and her rabbi led a ritual for her. She recalled, I think it was one of the most helpful and comforting things to have that spiritual guidance. It was more comforting for me to know. It was common enough. We have a ceremony for this, but there is something we can do. We have a ritual to mark this. Many participants expressed a version of the sentiment that Judaism prioritizes the mother. Some explicitly spoke of abortion as pikuach nefesh, or saving their life. One woman with a violent spouse spoke about her abortion in this way. She said, I think that, and certainly looking at the rabbis who are supporting reproductive rights and abortion, even just talking about that topic within Jewish practice and philosophy, this is an option that is okay and sometimes very necessary to protect the life of the mother for various other reasons. I did not trust my ex-husband. There were times I was really fearful for our safety, and I was very fearful for my safety and the safety for my child had I had this baby. Was this pikuach nefesh, saving a life for myself? Yes, I think it was. It's remarkable to listen to so many stories from Jews who've had abortions to understand how they think about their religious identities being intertwined with their abortion decisions. Most women, over 60%, obtaining abortions in the United States report a religious affiliation. These stories are certainly a counter-narrative to the dominant U.S. idea that religion is opposed to abortion. These stories also help us understand how abortion is part of a larger story in an individual's life. An abortion decision is embedded in so many other decisions, expectations, and plans. We always ask participants how their lives would have been different had they not been able to have an abortion. Those Those who had abortions decades ago were confident that their abortions allowed them to have the life they desired. For example, a woman we call Rachel, who had an abortion in the 1990s, told us, quote, "Sometimes I think about the child who might have been. They would have been an adult by now, and I miss that person. But I also realize that I probably would have had to drop out of school. I don't know what kind of income I would have. I basically probably would have had to just go back and live with my mom, which is not something that I wanted to do at that point in my life. The education that I got allowed me to have the career that I have now, which I like. So yeah, I think it would have been pretty bad." Rachel's little sister got pregnant at 20 and had her baby. Rachel saw how her sister struggled for years and lived in poverty. These reflections are repeated in the Turnaway Study, a multi-year national study that compared outcomes for people who had abortions with those who were unable to access abortions. On every metric, financial, educational, health, relationship-wise, those who were turned away from getting an abortion were doing worse than those who were able to get an abortion when they needed it. Abortion decisions are also complicated in that they're enmeshed in larger narratives about reproduction, gender, and religion. I want to share with you in detail one story from we're not supposed to have favorites, but one of my favorite research participants. Her name is Zoe, or that's the name we gave her. She was one of our first participants in the abortion and Judaism study. Her reflections on her abortion capture some of the nuance and tension that I have observed in my research on Jews and reproduction more broadly. Zoe graduated high school and began a gap year program a few months later. She began dating one of the young men on the program. They had sex, a condom broke, she found herself pregnant. Zoe knew immediately that she was going to get an abortion. Earlier in our interview, Zoe spoke about a class she once took with a rabbi who presented abortion as, quote, life-saving. It's a medical device. He was also saying, it's so much more than that. It's a device of autonomy. It's a device of empowerment. And it's also just a medical procedure. That's how she said it. So while she understood that abortion was permissible according to official Judaism, Zoe also credits her understanding of abortion to the way she was raised. She grew up in liberal spaces where she understood that she should not be a parent when she wasn't ready. About her abortion, she explained to me, it wasn't a fork in the road. It was just another bump, a step she had to get around. Zoe explains that she knew she was not ready. She said, I love kids. I was a camp counselor for many years. I babysit. I love being with young kids. And I knew that having kids now would ruin my love for kids. I'm so excited to be a mother, and I'm excited to give everything I have to it. I knew that if I was 19 when I had kids, that just wouldn't be true. I was really excited about college, a lot of factors, but I had an overwhelming sense that it just wasn't the right time, she told me. All of this was perfectly acceptable within Zoe's Jewish community. In fact, she knew she was supposed to first go to college, then find a career, get married, and finally have children. An abortion at 19 would enable her to do all of those things. So she knew it was the right decision. And yet, Zoe still felt like her abortion challenged some unspoken norms of Jewish communal life. From her Jewish experiences at camp and in her youth group, Zoe understood that there was a right way and a wrong way to reproduce. She said she knew that Jewish women were supposed to have babies, not abortions. She told me, quote, Reform, Reconstructionist, conservative, every space I've been in, traditions change, melodies change, expectations change, but the reproductive expectation, that stays the same. By getting pregnant at a time when she needed an abortion, Zoe felt like she had done something wrong. She absorbed so much of the Jewish continuity language that told her that Jewish women's wombs are sacred contributors to a Judaism under threat. So even though she felt confident that the abortion was the right decision and that Judaism and her community supported her abortion, she still felt like she had done something wrong by getting pregnant at the wrong time. And she was concerned that getting an abortion meant she wasn't doing the things she was supposed to do as a Jewish woman. One of the most powerful things that these stories do is they force us to see abortions as a more complex issue. People can be grateful for their abortion and still mourn the loss. They might want a baby very badly and know that now is not the right time, or their partner is not going to be the right co-parent. Some want their rabbi to be involved, and some feel that their rabbi has no place in the decision. Our abortion discourse has been so abstracted in this country, too often divorced from the realities of abortion experiences. But what Jews have done over and over through advocacy, medical care, ritual, sharing stories, and now through the legal cases, is to show how real people experience abortions. So on this Repro Shabbat, I hope that as we attend to the urgent political and legal context, we keep the people who need reproductive care on the top of our minds. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you and Yasher Koach to Dr. Michal Rauscher for sharing with us not only the history and the religious aspects of this issue, this conversation, but so much of our research that really brought it home. So thank you again. We have reached the conclusion of our service. So if you've been watching on live stream, it's your last chance to post something in the chat or the comment section of the live stream platform. Perhaps you learned something from our guest speaker this evening, or you are connected with NCJW and you'd like to do a little shout out for that right now. You have a moment left in our service to do that. But here in the sanctuary, we will conclude our service by turning to one another and saying, Shabbat Shalom.